Hi, Steve. How's it going?
It's going great, Kevin. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm in Toronto, Canada, right now on business, but we're here, everybody, to talk a little bit about fear. It's a big subject. It's something that I think applies to each and every one of us. And I think this is a good time to bring up the subject, Steve, and maybe give our thoughts on how we feel about it, maybe how we deal with fear in our lives. I'm going to start off by saying that I have found ways to minimize fear in my life, and I'm lucky to have done that. I've got to be honest and say that. It doesn't mean that I don't have fear arise every now and then, but I feel that I have the tools to deal with it and not allow it to take over my thought process or my activities. So it doesn't rule me. I feel that I've got some control over it. Um, Fear to me is a thought-based system. It is imaginary. It is a something that arises in us from past experience and then a projection to future circumstances. And our egos, in my opinion, are very attached to the process. The ego loves to see this fear arise in us. It's the part of the fan that makes the fear even greater in us because we can't stop thinking of it, and we are very reactive to those situations. But the ego also wants to help fix the problem that arises or the fear that arises, and is there to offer solutions. But the reality is that it's still a part of the process, and to the extent that you can help eliminate ego from the equation, you're going to be better off for it. And one of the things that I like to do is to try to come to that understanding when I become fearful of something, that it is just a thought and it's probably not true, and that I've made it up. The other thing that I also try to do is try to get into the moment and stop thinking about the future and bringing up the past. To the extent that you can be in the moment, I think you can help to quell the fear aspect that's in you. I also try to get a little bit of a perspective on the fact that we are a tiny speck in the universe, and we are one of a gazillion people on this particular planet. And whatever the thing is that we're fearing, the psychological fear that we have, and that's a good point to mention that what we're talking about here are psychological fears. We are not talking about dangers, so to speak, a tiger chasing you or fire or falling from a great height. Those are innate fears, and those are things you should be fearful of, or at least cautious of, as you if you encounter those. No, we're talking about things, fear of abandonment, fear of failure, fear of loss of things, fear of death. Those are the fears that we're talking about here. And for instance, I'm lucky again that I don't really have a fear of death. I've got such a strong belief in the fact that we exist after our human bodies are no longer serving us and we die, so to speak. My belief is that we carry on and we have other experiences as spirits and often reincarnate into the human experience as well. So there's never any real loss. Our egos are attached to this life. You'll hear many people say, well, yeah, I believe in reincarnation, but I don't want to lose what I've got in this particular life. I'm having such a great time, or I've got such great things that I don't want to lose those. And so, yeah, I'm afraid of death. Well, unfortunately, you're attached to the things of the trappings, so to speak, of this human experience, this lifetime. And one of the things I think that is a challenge for you to learn then is that those aren't really part of what makes up the spirit's idea of what life is. So that's kind of what I do. But even today, I had some fear I have had a presentation here in Toronto. I was talking about things that I wasn't completely familiar with, and I was supposed to be the expert as I was giving this seminar. And so this morning, as I was getting ready to go over, I was nervous, which is a type of fear, and I was worried that might come across as not being the expert that everybody thought I was. But I was able to pull the tools out of my tool belt, like getting into the moment of just thinking about brushing my teeth, or the fact that people are not going to judge you, Kevin, for not knowing the answer to a particular question. So just say, I don't know. If something like that comes up, there's nothing wrong with saying that, and you're not going to be judged. Don't make it into something. And guess what? None of that ever even happened. So there I was making things up. It didn't even happen. So there's a perfect example just today of what I was talking about earlier in this particular video. So Steve, I know you've got a lot of concepts about fear, and we could probably go on forever talking about this. But do you have some things that you want to get across on this subject?
Well, one thing that I wanted to connect with people on is the fact that we're both aware, Kevin and I, that fear is a very common thing. It's almost universal among humans. I don't know if there are any humans that don't experience fear from time to time. It's these non-real fears that we're focused on, and I think that we all have them. They're different for each of us. We may have specific fears that really obstruct us from being who we know ourselves to be. It varies from person to person. I, for instance, have had a fear in the past regarding work. So I had some challenging experiences early in my working life where I was fired from jobs. I have a hearing loss, and that made some of my work difficult, and I felt incompetent because of that. And that kind of carried through into my adult life and created a fear in working circumstances. It's not something that I see often, but it does crop up from time to time. I'm just giving that as an example because I think most of us have some kind of episode in our history where, for instance, maybe we suffered some kind of abuse, or maybe we suffered some kind of trauma from an accident of some kind, or maybe we were burned, or maybe we lost a loved one in an unexpected or a violent way, and that created a fear in us that that could happen again. And I'd say it's probably more common than not that people have some specific kind of fear that bothers them more than anything else, and they struggle with that throughout their life. And so that's one thing that we would hope to be able to do, is to help provide people with tools in their tool belt, as Kevin might put it, that could help them to get past these fears so that they can enjoy their life more. That's the main thing that I wanted to say. I just wanted to point out that my belief in reincarnation plays into the subject of fear for me, and that it's my belief that you could have had some traumatic experiences in another lifetime. Perhaps you died in a previous lifetime where you'd fallen from a high building or something like that, and that left an imprint on your soul where you were fearful of heights. And that could come into another lifetime, perhaps this lifetime, in which you have a seemingly irrational fear. Why would I be afraid of heights? I haven't had any bad experiences. Or it could be something else, a fear of water. Some people are terrified of water and they have no clue as to why. Or snakes or spiders or any number of different things that are in their own mind totally irrational. And yet, so that's an example of where I believe that other life experiences can play into and explain some of the things that we experience in the way of fear in this life. So
I actually have I have a direct experience with that, Steve. I had a pretty healthy issue with claustrophobia, and it was to a point where I actually couldn't fly, uh, if I were sitting in any seat other than an aisle seat where I had some open space around me, I would get short of breath. I would be sweating. It would, especially if I was sitting at the window seat and someone was leaning backwards and I was sitting next to a portly person and I felt like my space was confined. I would almost have a panic attack in that situation. I hated elevators when everyone would crowd in. And I actually had a past life regression, Steve, where I learned that I was one of the victims of the Pompeii explosion, where you probably know that the volcano exploded and ash rained down and essentially buried people alive in the town of Pompeii. And I was one of the people in that particular situation, and that I carried my fear of claustrophobia from that into this life. And once I understood that connection, my claustrophobia went away. I can sit in any seat now on an airplane, and I don't have any fear of elevators or confined spaces at all. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah, well, that's a great example, and that's also a plus for making use of past life regressions as a way to address fears that don't make any sense to you, or even those that do. It can shed some light, which helps you at least put a framework around a fear instead of just feeling bad about yourself and not understanding why this is. To have a little understanding of what put that in place can help you to manage it more effectively.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's almost as if your consciousness, once it understands where that irrational fear comes from, says, oh, okay, I don't need to deal with that anymore, and it goes away. And so I think people who've gone through past life regressions have actually gotten great benefit out of those for that exact reason.
Good point. And you mentioned some other ways of managing fear. I think another way that people could handle fear and make it a little more manageable is to not run from it, to not try and evade it, because it's going to be there and it's going to follow you, and you can't get rid of it by evading it. If you're able to, and this is not an easy thing to do, it can benefit you to actually be in that fear and actually dive into it, so to speak, and then find out that it isn't quite as bad as you had suspected it might be. And by facing it, I mean, many people have said that, you know, in order to get through your fears, you face them and you stand up to them as opposed to running from them. And I think that speaks to that.
Agreed. Yeah, for sure. And I would also say that people who say that they have no fear in their life, not that I don't believe them, but it's hard to believe that someone could completely eliminate fear from their lives. And fear can have a positive effect. There are learning lessons in all the negative aspects of our life. There are learning lessons, and it's so hard to see in the midst of being in a fear situation that there's something to learn there, as opposed to just be reactionary to it. But I think there could be benefits to fear that help propel you into a different situation or a different perspective that you didn't have without the fear. Remember that, in my opinion, fear is the antithesis of love. And if we don't have these contrasts in our life, we don't really understand we don't understand the other. So without fear, we don't understand love to the depth that we might otherwise understand it.
Absolutely. And that's a good point that you're making, is that there are benefits to fear. So you may think it's just, you know, this nasty aspect of us that doesn't serve us in any way. But I feel that it does. In fact, it's a way for the soul to propel us into learning what I would call life lessons. So I think in every life we come into, there are certain specific areas where our soul would like us to experience and learn certain things. And by us coming into a lifetime or having experiences that create fear, we're forced to dive deep into ourselves and to understand who we are and to learn those lessons that we're here to learn. And fear provides a great motivation for that.
Yeah, I think the one term that comes to mind as you're talking about that is the dark night of the soul. And that's a very fearful place to be. And we've both been there, haven't we, Steve?
We have, and I don't think there's anyone that has been through that that would say that they want to go through it again. But at the same time, I don't think there's anyone that's been through it that would wish they hadn't gone through it, because it provides wisdom to the soul.
Yeah, it's one of those painful learning experiences for sure.
It is. All right, good, Kevin. Well, I don't want to carry this on too long. I'd like to hear what other people have to say about it.
Me too. I would like to hear how other people deal with fear, or maybe not deal with fear, and what fears arise in them, because they're certainly different for different people, and it would be interesting to hear. And Steve, I'm guessing that this may not be the end of the discussion on this topic. Am I right?
Well, I would have to say unequivocally that it's a deep, broad subject, and we could probably go on for another hour talking about it. We've got to cut it off somewhere, though, and give some other people the opportunity to give their thoughts on it. Right. So that's good for now, but I look forward to carrying on the conversation on the Facebook site with you and me, adding more of our perspective on it.
Agreed, buddy. This has been great.
Okay, well, thanks, Kevin, for your input, and I enjoyed talking with you about it, and we'll look forward to talking to you more on the Facebook page.
Awesome. Bonsoir.
All right, you take care.